In the darkness of his grave, the Alpha King's son clawed at splintered wood, the poison still burning through his veins. Somewhere above, a woman's hands tore into the earth, frantic, bleeding, driven by a dream she couldn't explain and a longing she'd buried for years. Their first touch would ignite a bond neither should possess, a servant who watched him from the shadows, and a prince who never knew she existed, until the moment she refused to let him stay buried. What began as a hopeless rescue would unravel a lie so deep it poisoned the throne itself. Tamsin woke with a gasp, heart slamming against her ribs. The dream clung to her, steel-gray eyes staring up through dirt, a man's voice, low, cracked, whispering her name. She sat up in her narrow cot, threadbare blanket pooling around her waist, and pressed a hand to her chest. Her pulse raced the way it always did when she thought of him. Tyler. Prince Tyler. The one she'd watched for 3 years from every safe corner of the royal compound, polishing plates in the great hall while he argued strategy with the council, scrubbing floors outside the training yard while he moved like liquid fire with a blade, stealing glances at him during feasts when no one noticed her in the doorway. She'd learned his face the way other women learned ballads, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell forward when he was thinking hard, the rare flash of a genuine smile that made servant girls whisper for days. She'd told herself it was harmless, safe, a quiet ache she could carry without anyone ever knowing. Until tonight. The dream had felt real, too real. His desperation bleeding into her own chest, the weight of earth pressing down. She'd jolted awake, tasting dirt. Tamsin swung her legs over the cot's edge, bare feet hitting cold stone. The servant's wing was silent except for the distant snore of old Marta 2 doors down. Moonlight sliced through the narrow window slit, casting light over the cracked wash basin and the worn dress she'd hung to dry. She shouldn't go. Servants who wandered after curfew ended up lashed or worse. But the pull in her chest wouldn't quiet. It tugged like a rope tied around her ribs, urging her toward the forbidden glade at the edge of the whispering pines, the place the pack buried its traitors and its shame. She moved before she could talk herself out of it. Tamsin slipped into the corridor, hugging the shadows, heart hammering so loud she was sure the guards would hear it. She knew every back passage, every loose flagstone, every blind spot in the patrols. 3 years of invisibility had taught her how to disappear. Outside, the night air bit her cheeks. She pulled her thin shawl tighter and hurried toward the tree line, boots quiet on the frost-kissed grass. The pines loomed ahead, black against the stars, whispering secrets to one another. The burial glade lay just beyond the first ring, sacred ground no one approached, unless they carried a body. She found the fresh mound easily. A single rough stone marked it. No name, just turned earth, still dark and loose. Tamsin dropped to her knees. Her hands shook as she clawed into the soil. Cold. Wet. It packed under her nails, stung the cuts already there from kitchen work. She didn't stop. The dream played behind her eyes on repeat, those gray eyes pleading, the voice saying her name like a prayer. She dug faster. Dirt flew. Her breath came in short, burning bursts. Muscles ached, blisters split. Her blood mixed with soil, turning her palms to mud. Halfway down, she hit wood, a coffin lid, plain pine, hastily nailed. Tamsin wedged her fingers under the edge and pulled. Nothing. She braced her boots, leaned back with her whole weight, and yanked again. Finally, a nail groaned. Another popped free. A low scrape came from inside. Whoever was inside was alive. Her heart lurched. She tore at the remaining nails with bleeding fingers until the lid shifted, enough for her to wedge it open. Moonlight spilled into the narrow box. Tyler lay curled on his side, wrists bound with silver-laced cord, face streaked with dirt and sweat. His chest rose in shallow, ragged pulls. The drugs had left him pale, pupils blown wide even in the dim light. His eyes found hers. For one suspended heartbeat, neither moved. Then his cracked lips parted. "You," he rasped. Tamsin froze. He couldn't know her. Not really. She was background noise, a face among dozens of servants. Yet the way he said it felt otherwise. She swallowed. "We have to get you out." His gaze flicked to her torn hands, the blood, the way she trembled from the exertion and cold. His wolf, still sluggish from the drugs, stirred faintly inside him, lifting its head. Tyler tried to sit up, but the silver cords bit into his wrists. He hissed in pain. Tamsin reached for the knots, fingers clumsy. "Hold still." She worked the cords loose, wincing every time the silver touched her skin. The metal burned even her low bloodline flesh. She could only imagine what it did to him. When the last loop fell away, Tyler seized the coffin's rough edge and dragged himself upward. His arms trembled violently, muscles quivering under the lingering poison, and for a heartbeat, he almost collapsed back into the dark. Tamsin lunged forward, sliding her hands beneath his shoulders to brace him. Their faces hovered mere inches apart. She could feel the ragged heat of his breath feathering across her cheek, could taste the metallic edge of his fear and fury mingling with the damp earth. Beneath her palms, his heartbeat thundered, fast, erratic, but already growing steadier. His steel-gray eyes locked onto hers, searching. Why? A single word scraped raw from his throat. She had no answer he would accept. Not yet. Not when the truth felt too impossible. Instead, she whispered, "Because you weren't supposed to die tonight." He held her gaze a long moment longer, drinking. In the details, the streaks of dirt smeared across her cheeks, the ragged tear in her sleeve, the fierce, unyielding line of her jaw. Then he gave one sharp nod, the gesture of a man accustomed to command even when half broken. "Help me stand, please." She did. Slipping one arm around his waist, she bore as much of his weight as she could while he hauled himself free of the grave. When his boots finally found solid ground, he swayed dangerously, his fingers clamped around her forearm. Behind them, distant howls rolled through the pines, low, mournful, then sharpening into purpose. A search party for the prince? Or hunters making sure the job was finished? Tyler's head snapped toward the sound. "We can't stay here," he said, voice rough but steadying. "I know a way." Tamsin tugged him toward the denser wall of trees. "Through the ravine. The patrols never risk it after dark. The drop is too steep, the footing too treacherous." He followed without hesitation, though each step clearly cost him. She kept her arm locked around his waist, supporting him as best she could, acutely aware of how solid he felt pressed against her side. Broad shoulders, lean muscle, the tremor of exhaustion he refused to acknowledge. His scent enveloped her, sharp pine and something wilder that made her lungs ache with every breath. They moved in silence, broken only by the harsh rhythm of their breathing and the soft crunch of pine needles beneath their feet. Twice he stumbled, boots catching on roots. Both times she caught him before he could fall, her small frame somehow holding against his greater weight. The third time he lurched forward, she lunged again, arms wrapping around his torso to steady him. "Tyler," she breathed without thinking, the name escaping like a long-held secret. It was soft, almost a plea, the way she'd whispered it to herself in empty corridors for years. He froze against her, breath hitching. Slowly, deliberately, he straightened just enough to turn and look down at her. Even in the moon-dappled dark, his gray eyes cut through the shadows. "How do you know my name?" Heat flooded her throat, her cheeks. She opened her mouth, closed it, grasping for words that wouldn't sound foolish or desperate. "I clean your chambers," she managed at last. Polish your boots. Scrub the training hall after you leave. I've worked in the compound since I was 14. His brow furrowed, his expression both puzzled and impatient. That's not what I meant. She dropped her gaze to the ground between them. I've watched you, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. From doorways, from corners, but you never saw me. The silence that followed felt endless, agonizing. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. I see you now. Her pulse spiked so violently she was certain he could feel it racing against his palm, where it still gripped her arm. Inside him, his wolf stirred. Pretty one. Heart racing. She likes us. Tyler exhaled roughly through his nose, as though forcing himself back under control. We need to keep moving. So they did. The ravine opened before them like a wound in the earth, narrow, steep-sided, walls glistening with moss and trickling water. A thin silver stream threaded the bottom. Tamsin led him down the faint deer path she had followed as a child, gathering healing herbs for her mother on quiet afternoons when the world felt smaller and safer. At the base, she guided him to a shallow overhang sheltered by thick, gnarled roots. Rest here, just for a minute. Tyler sank against the damp stone wall, chest heaving. She knelt before him, gently turning his wrists to the faint moonlight. Raw, angry burns circled them where the silver had bitten deep. They used silver, she murmured, voice laced with quiet fury, to keep your wolf down. He watched her tear a strip from the hem of her already ruined skirt. Her fingers moved with careful precision, binding the worst of the wounds with the strip despite the blood and dirt caking her own hands. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. I know. Then why did you? She tied off the makeshift bandage with a firm knot, then lifted her eyes to his. Because the dream wouldn't let me stay in bed. Dream? She held his gaze. You were calling my name, from inside the grave. Something raw and bright flashed across his face, surprise, then dawning comprehension, then a heat that made her breath catch. The mate bond, he said softly, wonder threading through the rasp. Even drugged, even buried, it found you. Her lungs seized. That's impossible. I'm an Omega, he finished for her, voice gentle but unyielding. I know. She looked down at her ruined hands, the blood-streaked dirt, the trembling she could no longer hide. Omegas don't get mates. Not like that. His hand rose, slow, careful, and cupped her jaw. His thumb swept across her cheekbone, brushing away a streak of soil with a tenderness that stole the air from her lungs. Maybe the rules are wrong, he said. Her heart stuttered, then slammed forward again. Tyler's thumb traced the curve of her lower lip once, only once, then fell away. We can't stay here long. They'll track the disturbed earth. She nodded, throat too tight for words. He pushed to his feet, steadier now, though still favoring his left side. Lead on. They climbed out of the ravine and pressed deeper into the whispering pines. The howls faded behind them, swallowed by the endless dark of the trees, until only the sigh of wind through branches remained. Tamsin didn't trust the silence, but she kept moving. Just before dawn, they found an abandoned shelter half buried in brambles, its walls weathered gray and moss-soft. Inside, the air carried the rich scent of pine resin and damp earth. A narrow pallet of ancient furs waited in one corner. She guided Tyler to it. Sit, she said softly. He sank down with a low groan, slumping with exhaustion. She knelt and coaxed a tiny fire to life with the dry twigs she always carried in her pocket. The fire caught faster than it should have. a single spark blooming into a steady flame before she'd even finished arranging the twigs. She blinked at it. That happened sometimes, when fear was still running hot in her blood. Her mother had noticed it too once, and said nothing. As the warm gold light spread across the small space, she sat back from the flames, knees drawn protectively to her chest. He studied her in the flickering light, gaze lingering on the way her shoulders still trembled. "You're shaking." "Just cold," she lied. Without a word, he reached out, hooked an arm around her shoulders, and drew her against his side until her cheek rested against the solid warmth of his chest. Heat poured from him like sunlight after winter. "Better?" he murmured, voice rumbling through her. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Tyler tipped his head back against the rough wall, eyes drifting half-closed. "They told my father I ran, that because I argued with him at the feast, I stormed out into the night like some spoiled pup. King Leon believes it? For now." His jaw flexed. "Whoever arranged this knew he would." Tamsin's stomach twisted. She'd seen Lord Victor in the halls over the years, always impeccably dressed in dark leathers, his voice smooth as silk as he leaned in to whisper advice to the king. She'd overheard him once in the corridor outside the great hall, his tone light but edged. "The boy has fire, your majesty, but fire can burn the house down if left unchecked." "I saw Lord Victor at the feast," she said quietly. "He poured your wine." Tyler's eyes snapped open, sharp and focused. "He did. Said it would settle my temper." A heavy silence settled between them, thick with unspoken accusation. Tamsin hesitated, then added softly, "The servants talk. They say he's been pushing the king to name an heir soon." She met Tyler's gaze. "They could name his nephew as successor if you disappear." Tyler's hand found hers in the firelight. His fingers, strong, scarred from years of training, threaded through her smaller, bloodied ones without hesitation. "Then we make sure I don't disappear." She stared at their joined hands, his strong, scarred from years of sword and shield, hers small and torn from clawing through earth to reach him. Something warm and dangerous unfurled low in her belly, spreading heat through her veins until her skin felt too tight. His thumb moved, slow, deliberate, tracing the inside of her wrist where her pulse hammered like a trapped bird. The light touch sent sparks racing up her arm, straight to her chest, and she couldn't stop the tiny, involuntary shiver that followed. He felt it. Of course he did. "You're still shaking," he said, voice dropping to that low, gravel-rough timbre that seemed to vibrate through her bones. She swallowed, throat dry. "Not from cold anymore." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Her cheeks burned. She could feel the flush climbing, knew he could see it even in the dim firelight. His gaze darkened, pupils expanding until the gray of his eyes looked almost black, hungry. A faint ghost of a smile curved his mouth. "Good." The fire popped and danced. Outside, the first gray threads of dawn slipped through the brambles. "So what now?" Tamsin whispered. "We rest until full light. Then we find out who really wants me dead, and why they're so afraid of me coming back." She closed her eyes, breathing him in. For the first time in years, the ache she had carried so long didn't feel like a wound. Tamsin stirred at the first hint of dawn, the faint gray light seeping through the brambles like smoke. The fire had died to embers, casting a dim glow over the shelter's cramped interior. She shifted against Tyler's side, his arms still draped around her, heavy and warm. But something was wrong. His skin burned against hers, not the steady heat of last night, but a feverish blaze that made her pull back in alarm. "Tyler?" She touched his forehead. It was slick with sweat, scorching under her palm. His breath came in shallow, labored rasps, and when his eyes fluttered open, they were glassy, unfocused. "Poison," he muttered, voice thick and slurred. "Stronger than I thought. Silver burns. Infected." She cursed under her breath. The silver-laced cords had done more than suppress his wolf. They'd poisoned the wounds, turning them red and swollen overnight. Pus wept from the edges of her makeshift bandages, and his color had drained to a sickly pallor. He tried to sit up, but a groan tore from him, and he slumped back against the furs. "Stay down," she whispered, her voice laced with heightened panic. She rifled, through her pockets, nothing but twigs, a scrap of cloth. No herbs, no salve. They'd have to find some, fast, or the fever would claim him before any hunter could. Tamsin forced herself to think. The wildwood held remedies if you knew where to look. Willow bark for fever, yarrow for infection. She'd gathered them as a girl, trailing her mother through these same pines. "We can't stay here. The patrols might circle back. Can you walk?" He nodded grimly, jaw clenched against the pain. She helped him to his feet, slinging his arm over her shoulders. He leaned heavily, every step a labored shuffle that sent fresh sweat beading on his brow. The forest swallowed them again, but now it felt hostile, branches snagging at their clothes, roots rising like traps underfoot. Tamsin's muscles burned from supporting his weight, but she pushed on, scanning the undergrowth for the telltale leaves she needed. By mid-morning, they found a stream, its banks lined with willows. She eased him down against a boulder, then waded in knee-deep, the icy water shocking her skin. She stripped bark from the willows, crushed it into a bitter paste, and pressed it to his lips. "Drink this," she said, pressing it to his lips. "It'll bring the fever down." He swallowed with a grimace, eyes locked on hers. "You've done this before?" "My mother taught me. Omegas learn to heal what the pack breaks." She unwrapped his wrists next, wincing at the inflamed flesh. She cleaned the wounds with stream water, then packed them with chewed yarrow leaves she'd foraged nearby, a stinging paste that made him hiss through his teeth. Tyler caught her wrist as she finished rebinding the wounds, his touch fever-hot but gentle. "Tamsin, thank you." She met his gaze, her pulse quickening under his fingers. "Don't thank me yet. We need to keep moving. The fever might break, but if it doesn't, it will." He pulled her closer, surprising her with his strength despite the sickness. His lips brushed her forehead, soft, lingering. Heat bloomed in her chest, chasing away the chill of the stream. They traveled slowly that day, stopping often. Tyler's fever raged higher by noon, turning his skin clammy and his steps unsteady. He leaned on her more, murmuring half-delirious fragments of memory, council arguments, his father's distant gaze, a quiet presence in the shadows. "Always watching," he slurred once, like a shadow with teeth. Tamsin shushed him, focusing on the path. But inside, his wolf began whimpering again. Pretty Tamsin. Soft hands. Want close. Protect her too. By evening, the willow bark did its work. The fever broke in a sudden, drenching rush of sweat, leaving Tyler weak but clear-eyed at last. They holed up in a thicket of ferns, the ground soft with fallen needles. He pulled her against him, wrapping her in his arms like a shield. His chest rose and fell against her back, still too warm from the lingering poison, but steady. "You're always shivering," he noted, voice rough but clearer, lips brushing the shell of her ear. "Must be the altitude," she lied, though they both knew it was his nearness that sent the tremors racing through her, his heat seeping into her spine, the faint scrape of stubble against her neck when he shifted. Inside him, his wolf gave a low, playful rumble. Tyler leaned closer, nose tracing the line of her hair. "My wolf thinks you're lying." She turned in his arms just enough to meet his eyes, face inches from his, breath mingling in the fern-scented dark. What else does he think? A faint, tired smile curved his mouth, eyes darkening with something warmer than fever. That you're brave, beautiful, that he wants to nuzzle you until you laugh. His hand slid to her waist, fingers splaying wide, pulling her flush against him in a slow, deliberate drag that made her breath hitch. And that I should stop pretending I don't want to kiss you right now. The words landed soft but heavy. Heat bloomed, low in her belly, but she felt a sharp fear rise with it. This was borrowed time, a fever dream for him, something he'd wake from once they reached safety, once the throne reclaimed him. She'd remember every second, the way his arms felt around her, the low timbre of his voice in the dark. She'd carry it forever, but he would not. She pressed a palm to his chest, gentle but firm, creating the smallest space between them. Tyler. He stilled instantly, hand freezing on her waist, eyes searching hers. Tell me to stop. She swallowed. I don't want you to stop. That's the problem. His brow furrowed, confusion flickering through the heat in his gaze. She looked away at the fern shadows dancing on the ground. When this is over, you'll have your life again, your place. I'll still be the Omega who cleans the halls. These days, they'll feel like a dream to you, something you survived. For me, she exhaled, shaky. For me, they'll be real. I won't be able to forget them, and I'm not sure I can survive being the one who remembers while you move on. Silence stretched, thick and aching. Then Tyler lifted her chin with careful fingers, forcing her to meet his eyes. The gray was molten now, fierce, unguarded. I'm not moving on. His thumb brushed her lower lip once, slow, reverent. She shook her head, eyes stinging. You're the prince. I'm my savior, he finished quietly. He didn't push for a kiss. Instead, he pulled her closer again and tucked her head under his chin. Sleep, he murmured against her hair. We'll talk more when my fever's gone, and the world isn't trying to kill us. She let herself sink into him, cheek pressed to his chest, listening to the steady thunder of his heart. Reservations still coiled tight inside her, fear that this closeness was temporary, that dawn would steal it. But for now, his arms felt like the safest place she'd ever been. When she woke, the gray light of pre-dawn had turned silver. Ferns rustled overhead, and Tyler's arms were still wrapped around her. One hand had slipped under her shirt sometime in the night, palm flat against the small of her back, skin to skin. His face was buried in her hair, breath warm and even. Her reservations hadn't vanished. They sat quiet in her chest, waiting, but the heat between them had grown roots overnight. She could feel it in the way her body curved instinctively into his, in the slow throb of awareness where his hand rested. She turned her head just enough to see his face, eyelashes dark against pale skin, mouth slack in sleep, the faint bruise of exhaustion still shadowing his eyes. Beautiful, impossible, but hers, for a little while longer. She pressed a feather-like kiss to the underside of his jaw. A low, pleased rumble vibrated through his chest, half growl, half sigh. Tamsin smiled against his skin, small and secret. Tyler's strength returned in fits and starts, enough to walk unaided by the second morning, enough to shift briefly by the third. They moved deeper into the wildwood, staying off main trails, sleeping in hidden hollows. The bond grew stronger with every shared mile. She felt flashes of his emotions now, protectiveness like a low growl, desire like banked fire, a quiet wonder every time he looked at her. He caught her watching him once, while he sharpened a branch into a makeshift spear. You're staring, he said without looking up, a smile tugging at his mouth. Habit, she admitted, cheeks warming. 3 years of practice. He set the spear aside and crossed the small clearing, stopping just short of touching her. I like it, she swallowed. I didn't think you'd notice. I notice everything about you now. His voice dropped. The way your breath catches when I get close. The way your pulse jumps right here. He lifted her wrist, pressed his lips to the frantic beat. The way you look at me like you're afraid I'll vanish if you blink. I am, she whispered. He cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. I'm not going anywhere. The moment hung between them, lips a breath apart, heat crackling, but she turned her head at the last second, pressing her forehead to his instead. They kept moving. On the 5th day, the ambush came. Rain lashed the pines, turning the ground to sucking mud. They were crossing a narrow ravine when the howls erupted. 3 wolves bursting from the trees, eyes glowing with pack fury. Hunters, sent to finish what the grave started. Tyler shifted mid-stride, golden fur exploding outward, jaws snapping as he met the first attacker head-on. Bodies collided in a spray of mud and water. Pain flared through him. The shift still pulled at half-healed wounds, but he fought with savage focus, claws raking, teeth sinking deep. Tamsin scrambled up the ravine wall, fingers finding vines thick as ropes. Heart slamming, she rigged a quick snare, loop over a low branch, yank when the moment came. When the second wolf lunged for Tyler's flank, she pulled hard. The vine snapped tight around its hind leg, yanking it off balance into the mud. Tyler finished it with a brutal snap of jaws. The third circled, wary, rain blinding them both. Tyler growled, blood and water streaming from his fur. The wolf charged. Tamsin hurled a rock, desperate but accurate, striking its skull just in time. It staggered. Tyler pounced on the opening, ending it in a flurry of fangs. He shifted back, naked and bloodied in the downpour, collapsing to one knee. Tamsin rushed to him, hands framing his face. You're bleeding. He looked at her, rain streaming down her face, eyes wide but fierce. You saved me. Her pulse thundered under his touch. It's not just fear making your heart pound like that, is it? He said, voice rough over the storm. She shook her head, rain mingling with sudden tears that she didn't bother hiding. No, it's you. It's always been you. Her voice cracked on the last word, small and raw. But I have nothing to give a prince. No land, no alliances, no armies. I'm just an Omega who knows how to scrub floors and stay out of sight. The confession hung between them, stripped bare. Tyler's hands tightened in her wet hair. His forehead pressed to hers, breath ragged against her lips. Tamsin, you gave me your hands and pulled me back from death. You gave me your courage when mine was gone. You gave me your heart. That's more than any alliance. That's everything. Her breath hitched, sharp and audible over the rain. He tilted her face up with thumbs under her jaw and kissed her. The first press of his mouth was firm, deliberate. Rain poured down their faces, mixing with the salt of her tears and the heat of their breath. Then hunger broke through. His lips slanted harder over hers, devouring, desperate. One hand slid to the nape of her neck, fingers threading into soaked hair to angle her exactly where he wanted. The other wrapped around her waist, yanking her flush against him until every inch of her pressed to every inch of him. Wet clothes clinging, bodies locked tight in the storm. She gasped into his mouth and he took the sound, tongue sweeping in, tasting rain and salt and her. She kissed him back with 3 years of buried longing, fingers curling into his shirt, nails digging through sodden fabric to reach skin. She arched up, chasing more, and he growled low in his throat, the sound vibrating against her lips, raw and possessive. His teeth grazed her lower lip, tugging just enough to make her whimper, then soothed the sting with slow, deep strokes of his tongue. Hands roamed, his sliding down her back to grip her hips, pulling her tighter, hers sliding up his chest, over shoulders, into his hair, tugging hard enough to make him groan. Rain lashed them both, but neither noticed. The world narrowed to this. The slick heat of his mouth, the hard press of his body, the frantic slam of his heart against hers. When they finally broke apart, his breath came in harsh pants against her lips. I see you. I will always see you now, and I'm not letting you go back to thinking you're less. The bond flared, bright, searing, a sudden rush of light behind her eyes. Emotions flooded both ways, his hunger, his awe, his unyielding claim. She felt it all, raw, overwhelming, and gasped again, fingers tightening in his hair. Inside him, his wolf surged forward, no longer a faint echo, but a bright, eager rush of words tumbling over each other. She tastes so sweet. One more lick? No, 3 more licks. Tyler's eyes met hers, dark, molten, a little sheepish. Sorry, my wolf is enthusiastic. His thumb brushed her swollen lower lip, lingering. But he's right about one thing. You're perfect. He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, like he was savoring every second his wolf had begged for. She melted into it, letting the rain and the bond in his arms wash away her doubt, at least for now. When they parted, breathless, a different kind of urgency settled over. We should move, before the hunters catch our scent. She nodded, still dazed. They bandaged his wounds with what they had, strips of her cloak, pressure to stop the fresh bleeding, and pressed on. The bond thrummed between them now, a living thread. She could feel the echo of his wolf, a bright, uncomplicated adoration wrapping around her like warm fur. 2 days later, the rain finally relented, leaving the wildwood sodden and hushed except for the drip of water from pine needles. They crested a low ridge and saw it below them, a forgotten hunter's lodge tucked into a narrow valley where 2 streams met, half swallowed by moss and ivy. The stone walls were cracked and leaning, roof sagging under decades of fallen branches. Smoke stains blackened the chimney like old bruises. It looked like the forest had tried, and nearly succeeded, to erase it. Tyler stopped short. I know this place. Tamsin glanced at him. You've been here? When I was 9. His voice was quiet, almost distant. My mother brought me once, said it was our secret. We rode out at dawn, just the 2 of us. She told me stories about the old border wars, pointed out the stars. I thought it was just a game. He swallowed. She died 2 years later. I never came back. The words hung heavy. Tamsin touched his arm. Then maybe this isn't chance. They descended carefully. Tyler barred the crooked door with a fallen beam, while Tamsin moved through the single room. Dust motes drifted in slanted shafts of late afternoon light. A stone hearth dominated one wall, cold and black. A narrow loft ladder led to a musty straw pallet overhead. She knelt at the hearth. One stone near the back rocked under her fingers, loose, deliberate. She pried it free. Beneath it lay a small oilskin bundle, tied with twine gone brittle with age. Tyler crouched beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. What is it? She untied the knot with careful fingers. Letters, 3 of them, yellowed and sealed. One bore the royal crest, wax cracked but still clinging. Tyler took the crest-sealed one, broke the wax with his thumbnail, and read aloud in a voice that started steady and slowly fractured. My dearest Mara, the king's indiscretion was brief, but the child was not. The shadow son carries Leon's blood. Victor has been paid well to keep the secret, but ambition makes even loyal men dangerous. If Tyler ever senses the truth, that shadow will not hesitate. Protect my son. Hide this proof. Tyler's hand shook. The paper crinkled as his fingers tightened. This is my mother's handwriting, he whispered. He stared at the page as though it might rearrange itself. She wrote this. To her sister, Mara. He read the line about the shadow son again, lips moving silently. She knew there was another child, and she hid the proof here, in the one place she ever took me alone. His eyes lifted to Tamsin's, raw and stunned. Victor was paid to stay quiet, she said slowly. But the letter says he's following someone else now, serving another master. So Victor isn't the one pulling the strings? Tyler's brows furrowed. All these years, I thought Victor was the threat. I figured he wanted his nephew on the throne if I disappeared. He dragged a hand through his damp hair. But this means there's someone else. Someone my mother was terrified of. Someone powerful enough that even Victor answers to him. Tamsin felt the ground shift beneath her. Who do you think the shadow son is? Whoever it is, he's been hiding in plain sight, close enough to sit in council, close enough to watch me every day. Tamsin wrapped her arms around his shoulders. He leaned into her, forehead dropping to hers, breath shaky against her skin. We'll expose them both, she whispered. Whoever the shadow is, whatever it takes. He exhaled, ragged. My father has another son. They stayed like that a long moment, the lodge creaking around them like an old witness. Then Tyler straightened, jaw set, the raw grief in his eyes hardening into something sharper. We rest here tonight, he said. Tomorrow we plan. They built a small fire in the hearth, careful, shielded with a broken plank so the smoke stayed low and thin. The flames licked upward, casting long shadows across the cracked stone walls. Tyler sat against the wall, knees drawn up, staring into the fire as though it might burn away the weight of what they'd just read. Tamsin settled beside him, close enough that their thighs pressed together, the warmth of his body seeping through her damp clothes. He broke the silence first. My father. He was never the same after my mother died. I always thought it was grief, or the pressure of the crown. But now, he rubbed a hand over his face. Now I wonder if it was guilt. Tamsin's fingertip traced the edge of a scar on his forearm, grounding herself against the sudden ache in her chest. My mother used to talk about bloodlines the same way. She called them dream omens, said some people carry old magic in their veins, visions that come unbidden, warnings from the past. She told me never to trust anyone who asked too many questions about the royal line, that knowing too much could get you killed. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. She died before she could tell me why she was so afraid. But she looked at me the same way your father looked at you, like she was waiting for something to go wrong. Tyler turned his head, eyes searching hers in the firelight. Have you had those dreams of me? Before the grave? She nodded, throat tight. Since I was a girl. They were faint at first, just flashes. A gray-eyed boy, laughing in sunlight, then clearer. You calling my name, you fighting, you looking at me like... She swallowed. Like I was more than the girl who scrubbed floors. He caught her hand, the one tracing his scar, and pressed it flat to his chest, over the steady thud of his heart. You do matter, more than you know. The firelight played across his face, turning the gray of his eyes to molten silver. He lifted her wrist slowly, deliberately, and pressed his lips to the pulse point where it fluttered wildly. My wolf adores you, he murmured against her skin, breath warm and unsteady. Keeps telling me to hold you tighter, to make sure you feel it. She shivered. What do you feel? His gaze darkened. I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. He leaned in until their foreheads touched, noses brushing, breath mingling. Every time you look at me like that, I want to prove you wrong. I want to show you you're safe, that you're wanted. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open inside her. She lifted her free hand to his jaw, thumb tracing the line of stubble there. I've spent so long believing I had no right to want you, she whispered. But right now, I don't care. His wolf surged forward in his mind, clear, bright, and utterly shameless. She's wet from the rain. Lick, kiss, hold. Tyler let out a soft, breathless laugh against her lips. He's insistent, he murmured, cheeks flushing faintly. He wants me to lick every drop of rain off your skin. Wants me to make sure you never doubt you're perfect again. Her breath hitched. Heat flooded her cheeks, her chest, then lower. Then listen to him. He didn't need more invitation. He kissed her, slow at first, like he was memorizing the taste of her. One hand slid to the nape of her neck, fingers threading into her damp hair. The other wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until she was in his lap, chests pressed tight. She melted into him. Her hands roamed, over his shoulders, down his back, tracing the hard lines of muscle beneath his shirt. The kiss deepened, turned hungrier. Tongues met, slow and slick, and he groaned low in his throat, the sound vibrating through her, making her arch against him. His hand slipped under the hem of her shirt, palm hot against the small of her back, fingers splaying wide like he needed to feel every inch of her skin. When they broke apart, he rasped, "Tell me to stop, if you're not sure." She shook her head, fingers curling into his shirt. "Don't stop." They moved to the loft, musty straw pallet, narrow and uneven, but it didn't matter. Clothes came away in quick pulls, his shirt first, then hers, rain-damp fabric peeling away. He traced every inch of her like she was something sacred, fingers following the curve of her spine, lips following the path his hands made. She arched under him, whispering his name, and he answered with low groans and murmured promises against her throat. When he entered her, it was slow, careful, until she urged him faster, harder, nails scoring his back. The rhythm built, fierce and tender at once, until they shattered together, her cry muffled against his shoulder, his growl vibrating through her bones. Afterward, they lay tangled in the musty straw, skin slick with sweat and the last traces of rain. Tyler pressed his lips to her temple, breath still ragged. "Mine," he whispered against her damp hair. "Yours," she answered, voice thick with everything she had never dared let herself feel. Just then, a snare snapped outside, sharp, vicious, like bone breaking. Tyler was on his feet in a heartbeat, naked and silent, already shifting mid-stride. Golden fur exploded across his body as the wolf tore free, ears flat, hackles raised, lips peeled back from gleaming fangs. The low growl that rolled from his chest rattled the floorboards. Tamsin scrambled after him, heart slamming against her ribs. She grabbed the knife they'd left by the hearth and followed him into the cold night air. A hunter lay thrashing in the vine snare she'd set, one leg twisted high, body dangling awkwardly. The man's eyes widened in pure terror when he saw the massive golden wolf stalking toward him. Tyler shifted back with a fluid ripple of muscle and bone, standing lethal in the moonlight. Power rolled off him in waves, alpha dominance thick enough to taste. He grabbed the hunter by the throat, slammed him against the lodge wall hard enough to crack wood, and leaned in until their faces were inches apart. "Talk," he snarled, voice low and deadly. or I rip your throat out and let the wolves have what's left." The hunter's eyes bulged. He smelled of piss and terror. "Cyrus sent us," he choked out. "Said the prince was dead, buried proper. But if we found you breathing, he wanted proof, wanted the body." Tyler's grip tightened. "Cyrus." The name left his mouth like a curse. The hunter nodded frantically, words tumbling over each other. "He's got royal blood. Leon's other son. Been planning this for years. The poison, the grave, it was all him. Victor was just the puppet." Tamsin felt the ground drop out from under her. "My father. He died on a border patrol. They called it an accident, but he'd been asking questions about the royal line, about hidden blood." The hunter's terrified gaze flicked to her. "Cyrus killed him. Said he knew too much. Said there was a prophecy. Old magic in your blood, tied to the royal line. If you ever woke it, you'd be a threat too." Tyler went dangerously still. Cyrus. The quiet beta who had sat at the far end of the council table for years flashed through his mind. Always polite, always silent, always invisible. The man Tyler had passed in corridors 1,000 times without a second glance was his half-brother. A wave of nausea and fury crashed through him so hard the bond flared violently between him and Tamsin. He felt her shock, her fear, her fierce protectiveness, and beneath it all, his wolf's savage snarl. Kill him. Protect Tamsin. End this. Tyler's hand found hers, fingers lacing tight. When he spoke again, his voice was ice. "He buried me, to take what was never his." Tamsin squeezed back, fire in her eyes. "Then we take it back." The hunter laughed, a weak, terrified sound. "You'll never reach the capital. Cyrus has the council. The king believes you ran. You're ghosts." Tyler's smile was slow, cold, and utterly merciless. "Ghosts can haunt." He slammed his fist into the hunter's temple with clinical precision. The man slumped, unconscious. Tyler turned to Tamsin, eyes blazing with grief, fury, and something far more dangerous. Resolve. "We go home," he said. "We end this." She nodded, fear and fire warring in her chest. The secrets were out. Now the real fight began. The journey back to the capital took 6 brutal days. They moved at night, slept in shallow ditches during the day, and ate whatever Tamsin could forage. Bitter roots, half-ripe berries, the occasional rabbit Tyler caught with his bare hands. His wolf chimed in regularly, an undercurrent in Tyler's mind. Pretty Tamsin. Hold her when she shakes. Kiss her until she smiles. Tyler did. Every chance he got. A brush of lips against her temple when they stopped to drink from a stream. A slow, deep kiss in the shadow of an oak when the moon was high. The reservations that had once kept her guarded were still there, but they were quieter now, drowned out by the reality of his arms around her, his breath on her neck, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him from tearing the world apart. They reached the outskirts of the capital at dusk on the 6th day. The city sprawled below them, white stone towers glowing in the last light, banners snapping in the wind, the distant howl of sentries on the walls. Tyler crouched beside her on the ridge, eyes narrowed. "Cyrus will have the palace locked down," he said. "He'll have told my father I'm dead or fled. The council will be in his pocket. We go in quiet, find proof, then we face him." Tamsin nodded, stomach tight. "And if we can't find proof?" His hand found hers. "Then we make him confess, in front of the entire court." They slipped into the city through the old servant tunnels, passages Tamsin had used for years to move unseen. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and old smoke. Tyler moved like a shadow beside her, golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They emerged in the lower kitchens, empty at this hour, Fires banked low. Tamsin led him up narrow stairs, past the servants' quarters, toward the royal archives. The archives were locked. Tyler didn't hesitate. He shifted one hand to claws, sliced the lock clean through, and pushed the door open. Inside, shelves stretched into darkness. Scrolls, ledgers, sealed parchments. Tamsin lit a single candle, shielding the flame. They searched in silence. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then Tyler froze, fingers closing around a thin leather folder tucked behind a row of tax rolls. He opened it. Birth records. One name circled in faded ink. Cyrus, son. A second document. Payment ledgers. Victor's name appeared again and again, sums marked silence and discretion. And a third, a prophecy fragment. Twin flames will rise, one born of shadow, one of light. The shadow will seek to burn the line, the light will heal it. The Omega who dreams will wake the flame. Tamsin's hand shook as she read the last line. My dreams. They're part of this? Tyler's jaw clenched. You're not just a threat to him. You're the key to stopping him. Before they could say more, boots echoed in the corridor outside. Tyler shoved the folder into his tunic. Time's up. They slipped out through a side passage just as guards burst into the archives. The bond flared, a sharp warning from Tyler's wolf. Run. Protect Tamsin. They ran. Through back corridors, past startled servants who didn't dare raise the alarm, down spiral stairs, into the lower levels. The palace was waking, torches flaring, voices shouting. They burst into the moonlit courtyard near the old training yard, breath heaving, and stopped dead. Cyrus stood in the center of the yard, flanked by 6 guards. Tall, lean, dark-haired, face calm and pale in the moonlight. The quiet Beta, who had always faded into the background, now radiated cold certainty. Tyler stepped in front of Tamsin, body shielding hers. Brother, he said, voice low and lethal. Cyrus's smile was thin. So you found the truth. I wondered how long it would take. You buried me, Tyler snarled. Poisoned me. And for what? A throne that was never yours? Cyrus spread his hands. I was never given a choice. Father kept me, hidden. Mother died ashamed. You got everything. Name, title, the king's favor. I simply took what should have been mine. Tyler's wolf surged inside him. Fury, protectiveness, bloodlust. Tamsin felt it through the bond, sharp and hot. Cyrus's gaze slid to her. And you? The little Omega who dreams. The prophecy's light. I should have killed you years ago. The threat snapped something primal in Tyler. His shift was instantaneous. Golden fur exploded outward as his body reshaped in a blur of muscle and light, bones cracking, limbs lengthening, massive paws slamming into the stone with a sound that echoed off the courtyard walls. His wolf lunged forward with a roar that shook dust from the banners overhead, jaws wide, fangs gleaming in the torchlight. Guards scattered, but Cyrus didn't flinch. He raised one hand. In his palm lay a coiled length of silver chain, thin, shimmering, the same cursed metal that had bound Tyler in the grave. Faint dark runes pulsed along, the links, enchanted, alive. With a flick of his wrist, the chains whipped forward like striking serpents. They moved faster than any normal chain should, guided by old magic, hungry for flesh. The links snapped around Tyler's forelegs mid-leap, wrapping tight with a metallic hiss. Silver bit deep into fur and muscle. Blue-white sparks flared where it touched, the poison burning hotter than before, amplified by the runes. Tyler snarled in agony, legs buckling as the silver sapped his strength, slowed his blood, dragged him back to the ground with brutal force. He thrashed, claws raking furrows in the courtyard, trying to shake the chains free. Smoke rose from the burns. His wolf's roar turned to a pained howl. Cyrus stepped closer, smile thin and satisfied. You should have stayed buried. Tamsin's heart seized. She felt the burn through the bond, searing, relentless, like fire racing along her own nerves. She didn't think. She ran straight for Cyrus. He turned, surprised, silver chains still whipping in his grip. Foolish girl! She ducked under his swinging arm, snatched the dagger from his belt, and drove it upward into his side. Not as deep as she planned, but enough to make him stagger and curse. Blood bloomed across his dark tunic. Cyrus roared in pain and backhanded her with his free hand. The blow lifted her off her feet. She flew, slamming into the courtyard stones. Pain exploded behind her eyes. Copper flooded her mouth. The world blurred. Tyler's wolf howled through the bond. Rage, terror, love so fierce it felt like her own heart cracking open. The sound galvanized her. Something ancient stirred deep in her chest, warm and golden, restless. It had always been there, faint as a half-remembered dream, but now it flared hotter, responding to Tyler's pain, to Cyrus's threat, to the prophecy that had whispered to her since childhood. Her skin prickled, her blood sang. But it wasn't enough yet. She was still only Tamsin, small and bleeding on cold stone. Cyrus laughed, wet and ugly, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. Pathetic Omega. He raised his palm again. Dark runes flared along the silver chains still binding Tyler. A second wave erupted from the ground, thicker, black-veined, enchanted to feed on the bond itself. They lashed around Tyler's throat and chest like iron pythons, squeezing, burning, draining not just strength, but the golden thread that connected him to her. Tyler's massive wolf form convulsed. His roar choked off into a strangled whine. Through the bond she felt him fading, his presence dimming, the light of their connection flickering like a candle in a storm. No, she gasped, crawling forward on hands and knees. Blood dripped from her split lip. Tyler, fight it! Cyrus stepped closer to Tyler's struggling wolf, silver dagger raised high. Watch him die, little dreamer, then I'll finish you. The ancient power inside her surged again, brighter, desperate. She reached for Tyler through the bond with everything she had, her love, her fear, her stubborn refusal to lose him. Golden white light began to spill from her palms, faint at first, then stronger, pushing back the darkness. Tyler's wolf lifted its head one last time, eyes locking on hers. The bond steadied, just enough. The chains around his throat cracked slowly, then all at once. Tyler surged upward with a roar that shook the courtyard walls. Golden fur rippled with new power, amplified by her light. He slammed into Cyrus like a battering ram, claws raking deep across his chest, fangs sinking into his shoulder. Cyrus screamed, silver dagger clattering to the stone. Tyler shook him like a rag doll, then hurled him across the courtyard. Cyrus hit the far wall with a sickening crack and slid down, bloodied and broken, but still breathing. Tyler shifted back mid-stride, chest heaving, eyes blazing molten gold. He stood over Cyrus, every line of his body radiating alpha, fury. You tried to bury me. You tried to kill my mate. You will never touch the throne. Cyrus laughed, defiant even now. The king will never believe you. You're a traitor, a runaway. Tyler's smile was ice. Then we'll let him decide. He grabbed Cyrus by the collar and dragged him toward the throne room doors, leaving a trail of blood across the white stone. Tamsin staggered to her feet, ribs aching, and slipped her hand into Tyler's free one. The bond burned bright between them, her light feeding his strength, his fury feeding her courage. They didn't have to force Cyrus's guards. The surviving ones lowered their weapons and stepped aside, eyes wide with awe at the glowing Omega and the golden wolf who refused to stay dead. The great doors to the throne room burst open. King Leon sat on the high seat, face etched with exhaustion and old grief. Council members stood frozen in uneasy rows. Victor was there, pale, eyes darting like a cornered rat. Tyler strode in, Cyrus limp in his grip. Tamsin walked at his side, hand in his, chin high. The faint golden glow still clung to her skin, fading but unmistakable. Leon rose slowly, voice cracking. "Tyler?" "I didn't run, Father." Tyler's voice rang through the hall, clear and commanding. "I was buried alive, poisoned, left to suffocate in the dark." He threw Cyrus to the foot of the throne. "By him, your other son." Gasps exploded across the room. Tyler told them everything. The feast, the poison, the grave, the letter from his mother, the shadow son, the prophecy. His voice never wavered, but Tamsin felt the tremor through the bond. Grief for his mother, fury for the betrayal, love for her. Victor tried to speak, smooth lies already forming. Tyler's growl cut him off like a blade. "You were paid to keep his secret. You poured the poison. You are finished." Leon stared at Cyrus, at the son he had hidden, the son who had tried to murder the prince in secret. The king's face crumpled, years of guilt and denial cracking wide open. He stepped down from the throne on unsteady legs, each movement heavy, as though the crown itself weighed 1,000 stones. "I failed you both," he said, voice thick with tears he refused to shed. "I failed your mother. I failed the kingdom. I let shame and fear rule me, and look what it has cost us." He looked at Tyler, eyes wet. "My son, forgive me." Tyler's throat worked. "Not today." Leon nodded once, weary beyond measure. He lifted the crown from his own head with trembling hands and held it out. "The throne is yours, Tyler, and hers, if she will stand beside you. I am no longer fit to wear it. The lies I allowed, they end with me." Tyler took the crown, but he did not place it on his head. Instead, he turned to Tamsin and lifted it slowly, deliberately, toward her. "Tyler," she started. "My father kept secrets to protect his pride," he said, loud enough for the whole court to hear. "I will not begin my reign by making you small." His eyes held hers. "You go first, or we don't go at all." He settled the crown on her head, just for a moment, just long enough for every eye in the room to see it, before she lifted it back and placed it on his. "We will rule together." The court knelt, first one guard, then another, then the entire room. Even Leon lowered himself to one knee, head bowed. Tyler looked down at Tamsin, voice steady and sure. "Queen Tamsin." She smiled. "King Tyler." The throne room erupted in howls, a new beginning rising from the ashes of old betrayal. Months later, Tyler led Tamsin through the quiet corridors of the palace at dawn. The halls were still asleep. No courtiers, no guards in sight, just the soft echo of their footsteps and the pale gold light spilling through arched windows. He held her hand, thumb brushing over the faint scars on her knuckles, the ones that had never fully faded. He took her to the small private garden behind the old training yard, the one no one used anymore. A low stone bench sat beneath an ancient cedar. On the bench lay a narrow wooden box, unadorned except for a single carved rune, 2 intertwined flames. Tamsin's breath caught. Tyler lifted the lid. Inside rested a delicate gold chain, and hanging from it a small, polished splinter of pine, rough-hewn at the edges, but smoothed and shaped into a heart. The wood was dark with age, but faint traces of earth still clung in the grain. A tiny wolf charm dangled beside it. He took the necklace from the box and stepped behind her. "This is from the coffin," he said quietly. "The same splinter I clawed at when I thought I was going to die alone in the dark." He draped the chain around her neck. The wood settled against her skin, cool at first, then warming quickly to her body heat. I had it set in gold, he continued, fastening the clasp with careful fingers. Every time you feel it against your heart, I want you to know I'm only alive because of you, that everything I am from this moment, every decision, every breath, the crown, all of it, starts here. He closed her fingers around the pendant. It starts with your hands in the dirt. It starts with you choosing me before I ever deserved it. Tamsin's vision blurred. She turned in his arms, fingers still curled around the splinter. You kept it, she whispered. I couldn't let it go, he said. It was the first thing that reminded me I was still breathing. And every time I look at you, I remember the same thing. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away the tears that slipped free. I am not my father. He chose secrets. He chose shame. I will never do that to you. I will never let you feel like you're less than the center of my world. You are my beginning, my ending, my reason, Tamsin. His wolf sighed happily in his mind. Pretty Tamsin. Safe at last. Tell her. Tyler smiled and pressed a kiss to her. Temple. I love you. She turned in his arms, rose on her toes, and kissed him. Slow, deep, certain. I love you too. She curled her fingers around the splinter pendant, feeling the faint grain of the wood under her thumb. The terror of that night felt distant now, softened by everything that had come after. No more graves, he said softly. No more shadows, she answered, smiling against his lips. The kingdom stretched before them, healed and whole. The twin flames had risen, and the fire would burn bright for generations. Where are you watching from? I love hearing from you, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It helps this story reach more people.